Good morning, dear Sangha. So since we are here, so can we start with some meditative songs? And I believe that there are many songs that we haven't had a chance to sing, right? So maybe today we would like to offer or to grant you the song number 14. Here is a Pure Land. If you have the song sheet with you, please just open it and please sing along with us if you know. But if not, you can learn from all of us. Anybody noticed this song before? Please raise your hand. Okay, good. So it's good time for us to learn this song. This is a very beautiful song, and it's very peaceful. So we can find ourselves in the midst of the hot day, but somehow we enjoy our lives here in the monastery, in the monastery ground, and we can find ourselves in the Pure Land right here and right now. So please, be open, and so that the seed of happiness, the seed of joy can grow up deeper and deeper, and stronger, to make us like happy and joyful and fresh during the hot day. So please sing along with us. Here is a pure land, the pure land is here. I smile in mindfulness and dwell in the rest. Sorry, maybe we can go higher a bit. It's kind of low. Here is a pure land, the pure land is here. I smile in mindfulness and dwell in the present moment. The Buddha is seen in an autumn leaf. The Dharma is a floating cloud. The Sangha body is everywhere. My true home is right here. Breathing in, flowers are blooming. Breathing out, I am aware that bamboos are swaying. My mind is free and I enjoy every moment. Please sing one more time. Here is a pure land, the pure land is here. I smile in mindfulness and dwell in the present moment. The Buddha is seen in an autumn leaf. The Dharma is a floating cloud. The Sangha body is everywhere. My true home is right here. Breathing in, flowers are blooming. Breathing out, I am aware that bamboos are swaying. My mind is free and I enjoy every moment. So please, if you know the melody now, so please be courage to sing louder with us, okay? Again, 1, 2, 3. Here is a pure land, the pure land is here. I smile in mindfulness and dwell in the present moment. The Buddha is in an autumn leaf. The Dharma is a floating cloud. The Sangha body is everywhere. My true home is right here. Breathing in, flowers are blooming. Breathing out, I am aware that bamboos are swaying. My mind is free and I enjoy every moment. One more time. Here is the pure land, the pure land is here. I smile in mindfulness and dwell in the present moment. The Buddha is seen in the autumn leaf. The Dharma is a floating cloud. The Sangha body is everywhere. My true home is right here. Breathing in, flowers are blooming. Breathing out, I am aware that bamboos are swaying. My mind is free and I enjoy every moment. So here's some flowers. Thank you, Brahman Young. So let's sing the song number 15, I'm Free. This song has a movement, so please, the first time we can sing together. The second time, please do movement with us. So the sisters here are very kind to guide us how to do the movement. I am a cloud, I am the blue sky, I am a bird, spreading out its wings. I am a flower, I am the sunshine, I am the earth, receiving a seed, and I am free. Where my heart is open, yes, I am free. When my mind is clear, oh dear brother, oh dear sisters, let's walk together powerfully. And I am free. Where my heart is open, yes, I am free. Where my mind is clear, oh dear brothers, oh dear sisters, let's walk together joyfully. One more time, please, dear Sangha. I am a cloud, I am the blue sky, I am a bird, spreading out its wings. I am a flower, I am the sunshine, I am the earth, receiving a seed, and I thank you, dear Sangha, for companion with us. So this time is for us to greet our Dharma teacher. So since our brother is on the way to come, so maybe we can sing one more song. Okay. Whenever I wake up, the song number 13. Sorry, number 12. Whenever I wake up, I feel happy. Aware of my eyes, I feel happy. Aware of my health, I feel happy. Because I have learned to look deeply. Whenever I walk, too high, huh? It's too high. Maybe our sister can help me to play the guitar. I'm not practicing this song so well. Whenever I wake up, I feel happy. Aware of my eyes, I feel happy. Aware of my health, I feel happy. Because I have learned to look deeply. Whenever I walk, I feel happy. Whenever I sit, I feel happy. Whenever I rest, I feel happy. Because I have learned to look deeply. Again, whenever I wake up, I feel happy. Aware of my eyes, I feel happy. Aware of my health, I feel happy. Because I have learned to look deeply. Whenever I walk, I feel happy. Whenever I sit, I feel happy. Whenever I rest, I feel happy. Because I have learned to look deeply. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, dear Sangha. Upon we hearing the sound of small bell, please all rise up to greet our Dharma teacher.
Excuse me. Breathing in, breathing out. So we can smile and relax our body. So, thanks to the efforts of some of the friends helping with the retreat, we have a little bit cooler air. Maybe we can offer flowers to those who are trying to help us stay cool. And just aware of our body heat. And we can also enjoy the heat as we listen to 3 sounds of the bell. So, dear respected Thai, dear noble community of scientists, so welcome to the 3rd day of our retreat, the Buddha, the Scientist. And it's September the 2nd, and we're in the Ocean of Peace meditation hall. I really love the topic of this retreat. When I discovered meditation in my early 20s, I found my joy again. And somehow, until that point, no one had told me that joy is something that comes from within. Somehow, it seemed as I grew up as a young man, I always needed to find something else, something out there that would bring me joy. It might be some food, or an experience, or some music, or a sexual relationship, a romantic relationship. And so I've spent much of my life as a young person trying to get those things more efficiently. So much of my study as a scientist was how can I more efficiently get those things that bring me joy. And at the age of 24, I got I got burnt out. I realized that I didn't feel joy inside, and a good part of that was because I had developed habits to look for joy somewhere else. And I remember when I first went to sit in meditation with a group of people. It was at a yoga center near my mom's house in Connecticut. And I said, okay, I can do this. I can just sit here. And somehow in me, I felt that there's some wisdom that's telling me that actually everything I need is already there. It's already present in this body. I didn't get that because of some faith or belief system, but it was a kind of wisdom that I had gotten in touch with in certain moments when I was calm, my mind was clear, when I wasn't getting pulled away by anything. I suddenly felt like everything fit, everything made sense. There was a kind of harmony. And then I would get caught in a cycle of trying to get things again. So when we have a retreat like this, first off, we want to create a situation where you can experience that kind of peace, where you don't need to have anything, where you can just sit. Like yesterday, I heard from many of the friends in our Dharma sharing group the power of sitting in meditation with the whole community here in the meditation hall. And I see that's what gets me up in the morning. When I sit up, and like my brother shared, I practice reciting the poem. Waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to live each moment with mindfulness and look at all beings with eyes of compassion. So I did that this morning when I sat up. And just the 5 or 10 seconds that it takes to recite that is already a meditation. So it's already reminding me, I don't need to just jump out of bed and try to go get something. But I can just enjoy this moment, just putting my feet on the floor, just being with my body in the darkness and the cool. The cool of the morning is so tasty now because of the heat. So I really just enjoyed, it's not hot yet, it's cool. And I enjoyed my breathing, and I recited the poem. That is a scientific study. So that is observing our own mind with first person. Normally we're used to science being a kind of third person endeavor, so it means we look at it, the object of our study, as something that is outside of us. But with meditation, we're looking within ourselves, principally. We're using our own body and our own mind as the kind of crucible of our experience, of our experiment, our study. So as I sat there on the edge of my bed, actually it was on the edge of my hammock, because I'm sleeping in a hammock, because it's much cooler. So I sat there in the hammock with my feet on the ground, and I recited that poem. And I just breathed, and I didn't feel like I needed to go anywhere. I felt really at ease with my body, really at ease with my feelings. And then I start to do things to get up. Maybe to have some water, some tea. Sometimes I like to sit and just have tea for maybe 10 or 15 minutes before going to sitting meditation. By myself, or at the moment I'm in a room by myself, but sometimes with another monk or nun. Not nun, sorry, monk. I just live with the monks together, with another monk, and sit and enjoy tea. Can you hear me okay? Because there's a lot of echo over here. Okay, let's make sure. So I would just sit and enjoy tea, and it's so simple. Today I wanted to review a little bit of what my elder sister shared yesterday, so we can understand it clearly, and then touch on another, some of the kind of instantaneous, in-the-moment aspects of the experience of Buddhist meditators of the past that helped me to understand my mind, and especially how I get stuck. Because a lot of the reasons that a lot of the conditions that create our suffering are rooted in our attachment, or our, we say, grasping. So yesterday, my sister True Fragrance, she drew a kind of looks more like a pumpkin, but it's supposed to be a tangerine. So it's like a tangerine, the slices of a tangerine when we peel it. And so each slice is a kind of manifestation of certain events that we experience as me or myself. And the reason the Buddha taught these 5 aspects was because they're the things we get most attached to. So we get hooked on. So there's the body. I'm just going to write the first letter because I think from far away you can't see. So the first part is our body. So we get attached to our body. So we can see when we stop at the mirror, when we wake up in the morning, we check our hair, and maybe we look to see we need to put on some lipstick, although I've never done it, but or maybe we have some dirt on our face, so we have to wash our face. So we look at that face in the mirror and we think, we don't even question, we think this body is me. And we've been observing that face in the mirror for many, many years. So the invitation of meditation practice is to look at the possibility that this face is not me, that this body is not me. The reason we do that is to help us become free from our attachment to our body. We see that actually this body is just a process that's going on. And from the time we are in our mother's womb, and even beforehand, we are just part of a continuous process. And this body is a manifestation of that process. Because we are used to taking things so we can eat them, or so we can wear them, because we go around trying to recreate the African savanna and its climate everywhere we go. So we have clothing, We try to get clothing, a kind of portable shelter to keep our body protected and warm. We look for food, we look for sex. If we didn't look for sex, it's not sure any of us would be here. Our parents wouldn't have been inspired to come together and produce a child. So there are things that are driving us, and so because of those that need for a sexual relationship, or the need for food, or the need for clothing, shelter, we act in the world, and we start to believe that this body is me. But part of what I experience especially as a monk living in community, is that this body is much more than just my own. It also belongs to the community. It belongs to all of my ancestors. This body is a continuation of my ancestors, my parents, my mother, my father, my grandparents. And it is also part, you could say, an ambassador to the whole cosmos. So there's a movie that came out recently, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. So we're actually, if we look deeply into our body, we are experiencing everything, everywhere, all at once. And meditation helps us to see that all of our ancestors are there in our body. All of the hopes and aspirations of humanity are there. And we are just part of a continuing stream that is experiencing that everything, everywhere, all at once. Actually, when you realize that, then you let go of your need to run after things outside, because you see that everything is there. In fact, the Buddha said that. There was a famous sutra that he taught, teaching he gave to a monk, or actually, I think an ascetic, named Rohitasa. And he said, in this very body, because Rohitasa, he wanted to find some way to go to the limit of this world, to find the end. And in Western civilization, we had this idea of going beyond the end of the world, right? Like Odysseus to the realm of the dead. So there's always this concept in our mind of the world we live in and going beyond somehow. And so Rohitasa, he came to the Buddha and he said, I want to go to the very limit, to the end of the universe. And the Buddha said, Rohitasa, you can do that in this very body. The extension of this body from the soles of the feet to the top of the head encompasses the entire universe. So that's another way of saying everything, everywhere, all at once in this very body. All of the skills of our ancestors, all of their suffering, all of their joy is encompassed in this body. And so the process of practicing is not just for ourselves alone. Yeah, we take care of this body, not just for ourselves alone, but as part of a continuous stream. Just like we take care of the river, because we know the river is a lifeline to the whole community. Here in Southern California, we depend on the Colorado River and many other reservoirs. If not, you cannot have even maybe a tenth of the people who live here in Southern California. And if we don't take care of the river, if we don't take care of the reservoirs, then we are not taking care of the collective body, the health of the public health. So I encourage you to, rather than seeing this body as just your own body, to see it as the collective body. It is taking care of your body is a matter of public health. It's taking care of your mother and your father. It's taking care of your ancestors. And so just in the way that we practice stewardship towards the earth, we can practice stewardship towards this body. And it turns out that the less attached we are to how this body looks, the better we can take care of it. So when the Buddha taught about these 5 aspects, he called them skandhas, but you don't have to remember that word. It's just a Sanskrit technical term, kind of like a heap or a block of things. Those things we call body, and so all those things we put here. And we tend to have a very pronounced attachment to those things. So that's why when he talked about them, he always talked about them as the 5 skandhas of attachment. So it's not just that there are these things, but they are things that we get attached to. And we practice every day to let go of our attachment, to just let it go. Not worry too much about our body. We trust. Sister True Spirit, on the first day, she talked about how we can. I just had a moment of complete blank. So she was talking about how we. Oh gosh, sorry, I'm having a moment. Just blank. I'll come back to it. I practice not to get attached to my thinking. I was practicing letting go. So we have body, we have our feelings. Pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, neutral feelings. We have those feelings we've had as a child that we tend to reminisce over and try to recreate, to try to get back to some feeling of happiness that we had as a child. And so that's a kind of attachment. Rather than seeing how do I create the conditions for happiness here and now, I just try to hearken back to those times when maybe my family was happy, everything seemed perfect in the world. And yet somehow when we do it, it doesn't work. We don't feel happy. So letting go of our feelings helps us to enjoy our feelings. You'll hear a lot in the Plum Village tradition about enjoying. And the idea of enjoying is letting go. Just eat the tangerine or eat the cake, but don't get attached to it. Fully enjoy the immersive experience of eating that cake or that chocolate, and then just let it go. In that way, when you fully enjoy something, then you see the rising and the falling nature of the feelings. Just like the waves. Yesterday, Sister True Fragrance talked about our consciousness being like a wave, right? The eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. They're like waves on the surface of the ocean. And if you try to go to the beach near here and try to hold on to a wave, you have a lot of difficulty. And if you're a surfer, you would never even think to do such a thing. You just learn to, when the wave comes, you ride it, and then it's done. You let go. You don't try to control or hold on to the wave. So our feelings are like that. They are waves that come and go. And when we learn to fully enjoy the experience of our feelings, we don't hold on to them. So we let go of the grasping. So the body, feelings, perceptions. We may see someone who wears clothes that we recognize as beautiful, and so we already have a perception that this person is a good person, my kind of person. We see somebody who walks, talks in a different way, they have different color skin, and then we feel fear. Oh, I don't know. This is the unknown. I feel scared. These are all happening at the level of our perceptions. And so, again, recognizing the perception and letting go. When we're still attached, then that can give rise to feelings of fear or feelings of attraction. Usually that's what's going on. We're either repulsed by something or we're attracted. And so we just notice that and we go with it. We don't let that water our seeds of fear or anger. At the same time, we don't get attached to the attraction. We notice when we're stuck on someone and we keep following them around. I was practicing yesterday as we walked up the mountain to notice, where does my mind go? I see people, I'm walking by people, sometimes people are walking by me. Where do my eyes go? Where is my attention? Do I notice myself gravitating towards one person or trying to get away from another person? This is the kind of observation, the kind of scientific observation we do as practitioners. We notice this nature of, the Buddha, he described it as we want to get away from those people who are not pleasant, and we want to be close to those people that we love and we like. And that's the source of our suffering. We feel forced to be with people we don't like, or we feel cut off from those people we do like. So by letting go of those perceptions about like and dislike, it's kind of like to be a little bit courageous to do it. But it's really fun when you get the hang of it, because you think, I'm somebody who likes this, I'm somebody who doesn't like this. But when you practice letting go and you just receive whatever comes your way and then give whatever you have to give without any attachment, then you're training yourself to let go of those kind of perceptions which keep you hooked onto your body, hooked onto your feelings, hooked onto your perceptions. So this is the kind of training that we do, and this is how the retreat is set up. With the sitting meditation, the walking meditation, the mindful eating. Usually we just want to grab our food, sit down, put it in as quickly as possible, shovel it in our mouth, and then go on to the next thing, right? But we can't do that. Somehow we have to sit there for 20 minutes. And when the monks and nuns don't let us get up, if they do, we feel like they look at us like they're burning a hole in the back of our head. And actually we're not doing that, but it feels like that for a reason. It's kind of structured like that. So you let go of that rushing mind to just eat your food and then go to the next thing. When I go out of the monastery and stay with friends from college or even with my family, I notice that if we're not careful, we lose the beauty of eating a meal together. Like actually all sitting down at one time and sharing food. Right? The word companion means to share bread. And I noticed that one person will eat and then go and do their thing, and then another person comes in and they eat. And sometimes one of the parents is just putting food out there for whenever the kid will come in and eat and then go do their other thing. And somehow it loses some kind of beauty, I feel, of just sitting down together and enjoying the food as one community within the house. That's just my personal, maybe there's some attachment there, but I really love that experience of having the whole family sit down and eat together. And so in the monastery, we always do that. And if you don't have any food, somebody will try to give you food from their own plate. That's one part of Vietnamese culture that I really love. You can't, if you're sitting there eating at a table in Vietnam and somebody doesn't have food, you will get lots of food. People, they don't feel happy in their heart to eat when somebody else is not eating. So they will find a way to do it. So I learned when I'm in Vietnam to eat my food slowly. If I eat it quickly and I say, no, no, I'm finished, but people will keep giving me food. And I have to keep saying, no, 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 thank you. So I learned, okay, this is part of the practice. It's a cultural practice. We eat together, we experience this joy of eating together. Maybe we can listen to a sound of the bell and come back to our breathing. Look at my notes. So Sister True Spirit, on the first day, she talked about operating on autopilot. So autopilot is not a good thing or a bad thing. You know, Thai often talk to us about, for example, driving a car. When we drive a car, we have all of those experiences from the past of driving the car. We know we know how to look out for other cars that might be in our way, how to go with the flow of traffic. And so actually that autopilot nature is very helpful. We could not possibly think of all the things we need to do at the same time. The difficulty arises when, with our body, our feelings, and our perceptions, when we are completely functioning on autopilot all the time, and our mind is somewhere else. So mindfulness means taking that energy of what we learned yesterday, we call mind consciousness, the sixth consciousness, which we call mind consciousness. It means where our attention is right now. That's our mind consciousness. So putting that present moment awareness into whatever it is we're doing. So we can benefit from all the experiences of the past. Right? I don't have to worry too much about my balance when I stand up, because I spent a lot of hours as a little baby learning how to balance myself. And so right away, I can balance, and I don't have to think consciously about balancing. I can take a step, which on 2 feet, it's a very risky thing to take a step. I mean, you're very unstable. Much better on 4 feet, right? 4 legs. But because of this experience of balancing and being aware of the pendulum nature of my legs as they move backwards and forwards, I can allow that to go on autopilot. But in walking meditation, I bring my attention to very specific areas. So I bring it to the contact my feet make with the earth and my breathing. So again, autopilot is not a bad thing. We recognize it going on, and we decide where we want to put our attention, which is in whatever it is we're doing in that moment. And that's where things get really interesting. That's where you start to see the everything, everywhere, all at once nature of the present moment. Because there's so many possibilities of what can happen next. In your thinking, in your speaking, in your acting. There's multiple universes that are manifesting, and you're collapsing them all into one based on how you think, speak, or act in the present moment. So this is where autopilot and store consciousness are actually helping us. But we don't let autopilot only rule our lives. We bring present moment awareness. Tai used to say the kind of expensive, energy-intensive mind consciousness. We bring that present moment awareness to whatever it is we're doing. Like now, we're sitting, we're listening. So can we bring all of our attention to that sitting and listening? And not let our energy kind of leak out into unnecessary thinking. So in the guided meditation this morning, when we practice being aware of the flower, being aware of the dissolution of the flower, becoming compost, garbage, and then breaking down into its constituent parts, the earth, air, water, fire, space, consciousness. So that is a visualization that helps us to see this rising and falling nature of things. The flower is just like a wave, just manifesting. For a certain amount of time, it offers its beauty, and then it goes back into its elemental properties. And our body is also like that. Our feelings are also like that. Our perceptions are also like that. And so we get to just, as we say, ride the waves of life and death. That is the action of a bodhisattva. We say an awakened being that's deeply concerned about waking up. A bodhisattva, we say, rides the waves of birth and death. It just means you enjoy. This process is going on in our body and our mind. Don't get stuck. Just allow it to unfold. Allow your body to be as it is. Allow your feelings and so forth. And then you suffer less. That's the principle of this teaching on the 5 skandhas. So body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations. So everything is a formation. Tai often reminded us to look with the eyes of interbeing at everything that is. It means that everything is made up of non-it elements. So, for example, the flower is made of the earth and the rain. It's made up of the sun, made up of the air. It's made up of the flower farmer who grew the orchids and all of the ancestral orchids that preceded it. So all of those are elements that make up the beautiful orchid. And if you remove any one of those elements, the orchid cannot be there. It cannot manifest. So everything is a formation. Everything is made up of non-it elements. And the same is true of what goes on in our mind. So our joy is made up of non-joy elements. So when you experience joy, know that your suffering is also a constituent element of your joy. That your anger is also a constituent element of your joy. And then you don't just try to push away your anger or push away your suffering. You see, like we learned this morning, that thanks to the garbage, the flower can manifest. So, thanks to our anger and our suffering, we learn how not to continue to water the seeds of anger, the seeds of jealousy, the seeds of suffering in our consciousness, and instead to water the seeds of joy. So in that way, our experience of anger can be a requisite element for our joy. to manifest. Our true joy, the joy within, this kind of joy that I'm talking about, that comes from within. So yesterday we had this model of the mind, and we talked about this kind of basement, the store consciousness, and up here there's what we call mind consciousness, this expensive, energy-intensive, attentive consciousness. So store consciousness, we say, as my sister shared, is made up of all the seeds of our compassion, our joy, but also seeds of anger, of jealousy. They're all there. And that's a big relief to know that. We might think, oh, I'm an angry person, or we might think, oh, I'm a happy person. But the reality is all of us have all these seeds. And that helps me to be more compassionate to myself when I get angry or when I feel jealous. I remember that that's just the nature of a human being. I have those seeds just like everyone. And I know that my ancestors also experienced that jealousy and that anger. And the jealousy and anger that I experience in the present moment is not different from their jealousy and anger. It's of the same nature. The difference is that I'm learning to be mindful of those emotions, those what we call mental formations. And I'm practicing to see that they are made up of like the anger is made up of non-anger elements. For example, sadness. I look when I'm angry and I see, is there some kind of hurt? Is there some kind of sadness that is part of the conditions that give rise to my anger? What is it that I'm hurt about? What kind of attachment am I still stuck with regard to my body, my feelings, and so forth? So that I can let go of the roots of my anger. So we practice not to suppress our anger or repress our difficult emotions, but to understand the roots underneath. It's kind of like running out of room. So if we have I have a red marker. I can draw fire. Okay, so there's a raging fire, right? The fire, it could be the fire of our anger. And the fuel, this is the wood that we're using, that's the fuel for the fire. So, very simply, the Buddha talked about nirvana. Nirvana means the cooling down. It's another word for the ashes that remain the following day after you've had your fire for cooking, for example. The next day, the flames die down and you just have the cool ashes. So that's nirvana. So what is the fire? The fire of our afflictions, like anger or jealousy or hatred. So the experience of the Buddhist scientists of the past who are dealing with the experience of their own mind is to figure out what is the fuel that is feeding my mental formations, and how can I remove the fuel. So it's not to try to suppress the fire, but to remove the fuel. This is the fundamental, basic practice. mindfulness helps us to see the kind of fuel that is feeding the fire of our emotions, and how to remove the fuel. It's like when you have a fire, sometimes at Deer Park here, we have a very protected space where we'll have a fire with lots of brick and so forth. And the community will come together. And when we finish with the fire, we don't just leave it there, but we separate the fuel so that the heat can die down. When the fuel is all together, it burns more brightly, hotter. But if we are able to separate the fuel, maybe push this one a little bit to that side, this one to this side, then the flames die down. So the reason the Buddha talked about mental formations was to help us to see that they are arising due to causes and conditions. And if we understand the fuel that gives rise, for example, to our anger, we can learn how to remove that fuel so that the fire can go down. So there's the metaphor of seeds, and the seeds grow up into kind of flower in our mind consciousness. And says, hello, I'm here. I'm here for you. I'm your anger, I'm your sadness, or I'm your compassion. And with mindfulness, we recognize it and we learn how to, for example, with our anger, to invite it to go back down in the store consciousness. So the seed is still there, but it becomes less strong. And the more we practice to invite our anger, our jealousy, our hatred to go back down in store consciousness, the weaker the seeds become. That's the principle. That is meditation. Meditation is actually cultivation. It's a way of learning how to be a good gardener of our mind, as Sister True Fragrance shared yesterday. So what we're doing here in this retreat, we're learning how to recognize the fire, first of all. Because if you don't recognize the fire, then it's very difficult to put it out. So just like the firefighters who are fighting down by the border of Mexico, the fire, I think it's called the Border 32 fire. Yesterday morning we saw the smoke coming up. So first of all, they have to know the fire is there. If they don't know there's a fire, how can they help to contain the fire? So mindfulness helps us to see anger is there, sadness is there. And we want to be a good scientist, be a good observer of our mind, and really recognize and call that mental formation by its true name. This is anger, this is fear, this is jealousy. I've made a kind of handout for this talk, and I think I'll give it to you at the end, otherwise people will be looking at it. But it has the 51 mental formations that my brothers and sisters have been talking about. So all of those mental formations, they are there in the form of seeds in our store consciousness. And we learn, as young monks and nuns, we learn to recognize each one of them. And I can say from experience that it's more difficult than it seems, because our mind is very tricky. And we often want to project an image of ourselves that is more beautiful than the one that maybe is really there. Sometimes we go the opposite direction. We project an image that's more ugly of ourselves than the one that's really there. We kind of go to two extremes. And the reality is actually very deep below those projected images. It means we have all of those seeds. And because we have that tendency to project, sometimes we say, for example, that something that is really anger, we do it out of compassion. Right? You say like, oh, I want to help you, that's why I'm getting angry at you. But the other person just feels a lot of fear from your anger. And that's something I've also done, and I've had to learn how to transform that behavior. Yeah. Is it really compassion, or is there some anger, hurt underneath it? So recognizing the mental formation and calling it by its true name is essential. We have the breathing. Breathing in, I'm aware, I'm breathing in. And breathing out, I'm aware, I'm breathing out. We start with just being aware of the breath. Just being aware of how it feels in our throat, in our lungs, in our body. Because if we can't recognize our breathing, how do we expect to recognize our anger when it manifests, right? So the breathing is a bit easier to recognize than our mental formations. You were not likely to mistake your breathing for a plane flying by in the sky, right? Or a flower. But you may give the wrong name to your mental formations. So by really being attentive to your breath throughout the day, whether during sitting meditation, during walking meditation, really mastering the breathing, then it becomes easier to recognize your mental formations and call them by their true name. When you call them by their true name, I always say it's a little bit like that scene in The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy and the lion and the scarecrow and the Tin Man and Toto, they all come and suddenly they're before the Wizard of Oz. Has everyone seen that movie? Yeah, okay. And they're very frightened, like, oh, the Wizard of Oz, he's very big and scary and projected on us, up there like some kind of otherworldly being. But then what happens, right? Toto sees something moving and there's a curtain, and he goes and he pulls the curtain aside, and then you see it's just the old man with a bunch of gears and a projector, and he's projecting his image onto the screen, right? So that's what happens in our mind. I think it's a very powerful teaching. We experience very dramatic waves, like crashing waves inside of ourselves, overwhelming emotions. But underneath it, there's just a quiet and hurt 5-year-old child who needs love, who's looking for a bit of attention from his mom or his dad. And yet it manifests as this anger, which then becomes like a wildfire, which spreads into the collective. And when we're a public figure or a politician, that emotion can spread everywhere to millions of people, right? So it's not just an individual experience. All of those hurt 5-year-old children, they are not able to recognize the emotion and call it by its true name. See the damage that is being done, and then it spreads out and becomes a real danger for the health, for the public health. Right? It becomes a real danger for all of us. So understanding the nature of our mental formations is fundamental. It's a fundamental part of the training of our mind. And as practitioners here in the present moment, 21st century America, we're very fortunate. In the past, usually only the monks and nuns learn about these things. But because there's so much interest in Buddhism and these teachings, now everyone wants to learn. And so I really encourage you all to look at this list of mental formations and start to recognize here in the retreat when those emotions are coming up. Can you recognize a feeling of anger, sadness, other feelings like shame? Can you recognize shame when it manifests? What does it feel like? inside your body? What does it look like with your mind's eye? So this is a foundational practice of meditation, cultivating the mind. And the last of the 5 is consciousness. So yesterday we learned about, you can put numbers on them. It's not terribly important to have to say 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 7th, or 8th. It's just a way of keeping it clear in our mind. But we have, the sense organs. So we have the eye, our ear, nose, tongue, and body. And we have our mind consciousness. So the senses all interact with our mind. That's why when you see something, for example, you can think of your mother. She may not be here, but you have an image of your mother in your mind. You can close your eyes and generate that image. So even though you've seen your mother many times, but somehow in your mind there's also an image you can generate, maybe many different images of your mother. So eye consciousness in the present moment observes a flower, observes the monk talking. But if you close your eyes, it can also generate an image in our mind. And the same is true for sounds. For example, when you get a song stuck in your head. So you've heard the song, but right now there are no sound waves propagating through the air, vibrating your eardrum. But yet, you can hear the song in your mind. So mind consciousness is interacting with all of the sense organs, eye, ear, nose, the powerful memories that can get triggered by a smell, tongue, body. Mind consciousness is the 6th consciousness. And then we learned yesterday about a 7th consciousness, which is living and operating, we might say, along the border between mind consciousness. It's always reaching in. It's kind of like it's got tentacles reaching into our store consciousness. So my sister shared, and I think there was a question as well about this 7th consciousness we call manas. So manas has a nature of always wanting to appropriate what is there in store consciousness as me, mine, myself. This is mine, like my precious joy, my precious anger. Yeah, it's operating like that. It wants to, and it's not with as Sister True Fragrance mentioned, it's not with a necessarily bad intention. Yeah, it just can't help itself. It always wants to appropriate. It has the nature of trying to appropriate the seeds in store consciousness as its own. And that is based on a need for survival, right? The need to get food, to get sex, to get shelter, to somehow survive, continue. And so it drives us to try to get things. Yeah. That's the nature of manas. So Thai used to call it the lover. So if mind consciousness is the gardener, manas is the lover. And we know what happens to the jilted lover, right? All kinds of very painful emotions, painful sensations. So I think Mick Jagger said, you can't always get what you want. Right? So that's talking about the story of manas. Always wanting to get this, get that. Reaching out for other things. Not the most difficult thing for manas, and the place, the locus of its transformation, is to just enjoy dwelling happily in the present moment. Letting go of grasping. But it's very difficult because it's always, it's kind of like when you know, sometimes when we are clearing trails or brush out in the chaparral here, you'll see rock, and underneath the rock there's a whole mat of roots, and the roots are going down deep. Like the oak trees, their roots go down and they even crack the rock as they reach down. So it's a little bit like that. Manas is like, you put something over it, but the roots continue to kind of proliferate, and then they find another place where they can come up. So even when you come to a retreat and you feel very free and you practice letting go of all your attachments, but somehow they're still there. And when you get put in that situation where those things that you like are there, you notice that it feels like a monster coming out, like grabbing food, and finally I left that retreat, really all that vegetarian food, and I can only eat during the mealtime. So when I get back, I'm going to open the fridge, sit there with a big canister or box of chocolate ice cream and just eat it, and nobody has to see me do it. That's the manas. Right? You don't need to eat that, like half a carton of chocolate ice cream. But somehow there's something in you, because like the monks and nuns, they wouldn't let me do this, and now I can do it when I go home. You know what I'm talking about? When nobody's looking and you shut the door. That's when manas manifests. And so the practice is not to become frightened or become angry at that tendency, but rather to smile and notice that manas is there. And say, manas, I know how you operate. I know that eating half a carton of chocolate ice cream is not going to make me more happy. And maybe I'll just take one spoonful. I remember there was one sister, she really loved to eat chocolate. And she noticed that throughout the day, she was often thinking about when would be the next opportunity for her to eat chocolate. And that was causing a lot of suffering and pain in her life. And so she said, okay, I make a commitment. I will only eat chocolate with other people. And so she doesn't cut off completely eating chocolate, but she has to find a chocolate partner every time she wants to eat chocolate. So she goes up to somebody, would you like to eat chocolate with me? Oh, okay. Not too difficult. It's not too difficult to find a chocolate partner. So in the monastery, we have what we call the practice of second body. And that's one of the skillful methods we have to transform this manas tendency. So everything we do, we have to do it with the second body. If we go on the internet, we have to go on it with the second body. If we want to go into town to go shopping, we go with the second body. If we want to go visit our family, then the community tries to look and send us another monk or to go with us, if we're a monk or a nun with a nun. And that I find that's very. It's not that it. That's the training. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's our training, and I find that's very, very helpful to have a second body, because you remember you have another practitioner there by your side who reminds you They don't have to say anything. They don't have to, say, "Oh, remember, you're attached to that." In fact, that's not very helpful when they say. But just by their presence and their practice, they help us remember to come back to our body and let go of whatever it is we think we need to do. And so it helps us to transform our obsessive mind, that tendency to obsess about certain things, like we need it in order to survive. Maybe we can listen to a sound of the bell. So I've been very interested lately in the nature of metabolism. In the study of the origin of life, we try to understand this nature of the respiration that happens in the mitochondria within our cells. So, and I'm still learning. But I find it very fascinating how when we breathe in oxygen, the mitochondria in our cells are able to oxidize the glucose that is in the food and the carbohydrates and the proteins in our body and generate energy, right, in the form of ATP, it's called, so the kind of basic unit of cellular energy. And I learn about it not for the sake of just knowing, but to try to really get in touch with what is going on in my body when I'm breathing. Because there's something very ancient there. I feel that the Buddha taught mindfulness of breathing because he had a deep insight that this is the very foundation of life itself. So as far as we know, for at least 1 billion years, probably more, maybe 2 billion years, life on Earth was anaerobic, right? We didn't have oxygen in the large quantities that we have now. And so perhaps bacteria that was living in the fume that come out from the bottom of the sea, the fissures where hot water is coming out from under the earth. That bacteria was then able to use that heat energy with sulfur to actually replicate itself. Even our studies to see how that could happen in a way that's beyond before anything we could call life. So the chemical pathways, something called the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. And eventually kind of lipid barrier formed, and that we had the first kind of cell form. And then later we had green algae or cyanobacteria, which then started to replicate on the surface of the oceans. So from those early cell forms, we had what we now call the ancestors of the plant. And photosynthesis could take place. So it means taking all the carbon dioxide from the air with the energy provided by photons from sunlight, and then producing glucose, right, some kind of sugars, as well as releasing, as a kind of waste product, oxygen. So all of this oxygen that we experience today was generated by this massive replication of algae on the surface of the oceans, as far as we can tell. And so new forms of life, animal forms of life, which were aerobic, began to evolve and to use that oxygen in the air and react to oxidize the glucose. And at some point, it seems, these early kind of engines of energy became incorporated into what we now call the eukaryotic cells, which is the cells that make up our human body, right? Animal body. So so you have mitochondria, which is like a ancient bacteria, which is inside the cell of the eukaryotic cell, and it's a kind of engine producing energy, taking the oxygen and glucose and generating energy. So without the breathing, we cannot have the energy to live. And you may like to practice as you're breathing in the retreat, being aware of that process of respiration that's happening in every cell of your body. It's not you, it's not me or mine or myself. It's just going on in every cell of your body. So by breathing in mindfully, you're helping that process to manifest in an easeful way. If you're not aware of your breathing can become very short. You start to feel dizzy. You feel rushed, hurried. You feel ill at ease in your body. There's not enough oxygen for that process to take place. So by breathing mindfully, you're actually honoring the ancestors in every cell of your body. The ancestral mitochondria, the ancestral cells. And I just want to go from this kind of basic energy generation that's going on with our respiration into this split-second, instantaneous process of consciousness and thinking, which is a product of that respiration. And if you learn to master what we call the universal mental formations, then you get to experience everything, everywhere, all at once. Okay? So that's the beauty of it. So, in Sanskrit, they're called sarvatraga. Sarvatra means everywhere. It means, or we translate as universal. And ga is just, it means it goes everywhere. So it's in a way it's saying everything, everywhere, all at once. And the first aspect of it is contact. So the eye comes in contact with forms. The ear comes in contact with sounds. The nose comes in contact with smells and so forth. Mind becomes in contact with thinking, with thoughts, perceptions. Without contact, there's no moment of consciousness. So we say contact is a universal mental formation. In order for a moment of consciousness to manifest, there has to be contact. And consciousness is always consciousness of something. So a moment of consciousness creates a subject and an object. This is important because by creating a subject and object, we create what we call kind of dual grasping. That is the basis of our attachment. In every moment, when we have a moment of consciousness, for example, our eyes see a form, so there's contact, there's a moment of eye consciousness, which manifests as a result of that contact. That is there. In the moment of consciousness, you create a subject, which is the viewer, and the object, which is the viewed. So this is the fundamental teaching of Buddhist psychology. For consciousness to be there, a dualistic, or we call, in the Buddhist tradition, we call dual grasping arises. We grasp at the subject and the object. And because the experience of seeing through our eyes, hearing through our ears and nose appears to have a continuity, we start to think that subject is me, a permanent separate self. So countless, like billions and billions of events of visual consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, they flow together in a kind of continuity, and we grasp onto that continuity as a permanent subject, self, me. And the teaching on non-self in Buddhism is to help us to overcome that attachment to a subject. So maybe I'll say it one more time. So this is important. So not for the purpose of learning Buddhist psychology, but for the purpose of applying in your experience of reality. When a moment of consciousness arises, there is contact between a perceived subject and a perceived object. And because there's the experience of continuity, just like imagine a man who's standing there with a stick of flame, and he's twirling it in a circle. Right? So in every moment, the flame is only in one place. But our experience of it is as a continuous circle. So that's like our consciousness. Thai call it the cinematographic nature of consciousness. Just like in the cinema, you have the film, and each film is made up of one still. And because the stills are going in front of the projector at 30 frames per second, we experience a continuity, when in fact there's just a succession of still photographs. So consciousness is like that. In every moment of consciousness, there's contact, there's subject and object. And we tend to grasp at the subject and the object. And that is the root of our attachment. So it's so important to recognize this, because if we can let go of that attachment that happens to the subject and the object, we become free. Yeah. So contact, the first universal formation. The first formation that's everywhere. Attention. So quite often our attention is pointed in a certain direction. In Sanskrit, this is manaskara. It means directing your mind in one direction. So attention means whatever is within the field of our eye vision, or if we direct our attention to our hearing, smell, taste. At one moment we can basically give attention to one thing. There's always a kind of peripheral awareness which is going on. That's something we learn from neuroscience. But usually all the neurons, they kind of oscillate in a pattern, in a kind of in rhythm with each other towards one object of attention. In fact, in studying neuroscience, we've been able to see clusters of neurons which pulse at a similar rate, which actually represent the subject, which is then attending to other groups of neurons, which are the perceived object. And so what we perceive as something going on outside of ourselves is actually only going on in our mind. And at each moment, different objects of attention are vying to be the number one that gets all of our attention. So this is happening in every moment. It has to be present for a moment of consciousness to be there. And it's important for us to recognize because our attention is what we consume. It's what helps. It's kind of like you could think of it like your mouth consuming food. Wherever you put your attention, that is what you become. So when you look at, so if you want to know who you are in that moment, look at what you're paying attention to. That is what you become. It's a source of nutriment. And that the trajectory that we experience going forward, the universe that we move into in the next moment, will be the product of where we put our attention. So it's very crucial to see this happening. Because when you see it, it's happening so quickly, you can change the direction of your attention. You can choose, for example, to come on a retreat where you're going to practice mindful breathing and be supported by the community to do that. That's a choice of mindful consumption. So you're giving your attention over 3 or 4 days fully to the practice of mindful breathing, mindful walking, and that positive nourishment is what affects your future. So it gives you a kind of solidity, peacefulness in your heart that you can always come back to whenever you're overwhelmed by a difficult emotion. So understanding that our attention is always there and that it's the way that we consume is very important. Feelings. Every moment of consciousness has some kind of feeling. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, can be mixed. The important thing is to recognize that none of our thoughts are entirely neutral. There's always some tone, some feeling tone, even if it's a neutral feeling, but it's going in a certain direction. So by giving attention to our thoughts, we're actually consuming those feelings. We can be consuming painful feelings, consuming pleasant feelings. So we make a choice when we practice meditation to stop the incessant flow of our thinking. We don't look at ourselves as a victim of our thoughts any longer. We see that we are consciously producing the conditions for the thoughts that manifest in our mind in every moment. We take responsibility for our thinking. And we recognize that that thinking will be the nutriment, will be the fuel for the feelings that follow. Okay, so that every moment, you don't have to wait. Remember, everything, everywhere, all at once. It's right here. There's only this present moment. And if we wait around, we lose our whole life. So contact, attention, feeling, perception. So you see how these universal mental formations also relate to the 5 skandhas. Right? We learned about perception. In the practice of concentration, we train ourselves to let go of our attachment to signs and the manifestation of a kind of signal or sign, perception. So actually the Sanskrit word for perception is samjna, which is the root of the word sign in English. It's the same. We practice what we call the concentration on signlessness. And I've actually practiced when I was a young meditation practitioner, for example, to, like for a few days, not to read anything. Like to notice the habitual nature of my eye whenever I see some written words, to immediately start reading it. And it's very fun if you can try it for a week. If you're, maybe don't do it a week that you're working. Because for work you have to read things, right? At that time I was just practicing in a meditation center. I didn't have actually I did have a job, I was substitute teaching, but I didn't have to do much reading. So I could just practice just being, okay, I'm gonna let go of the attachment my eyes have to automatically reading. So that's a practice of signlessness. But we can go deeper than just reading words. We can notice those perceptions that we're having all the time, especially with regard to certain people, certain relationships. So yesterday we learned that manas has a nature to project an image onto store consciousness, and it falls in love with that image. So that is what we do when we fall in love. Right? We project an image onto that other person that we fall in love with, and at the moment that we are falling in love, that image is so beautiful. That person is perfect. In the entire universe, there's only that one person. In your whole life, you've been just waiting for the moment when you're going to meet that person. And now all of the good things, the positive things in your life, you project onto that person. I don't know how he possibly stands a chance of meeting up to that image that you project. I think he or she just has very little chance of meeting anything like that image. But yet, that's what we do. And we feel like the oxytocin in our body, we feel all these hormones running, because suddenly all the things that we feel are good and wonderful about the world have come together and manifested in that one person that we fall in love with. So that's the operation of manas. Because the reality is quite different down in store consciousness. In store consciousness, he or she has all the seeds. Anger, jealousy, fear, compassion, love, mindfulness. They're all there. But we project an image. And we fall in love with that image. So our perceptions have a very powerful impact on our experience of reality. So we practice to check our perception. Are you sure? You may see the calligraphy of our teacher. Are you sure? That's the practice with the fourth universal mental formation. To let go of our attachment to our perception. And notice that most of our perceptions are wrong perceptions. We have a limited bandwidth in our mind. I don't know what the baud rate is exactly. Maybe there are some scientists here who can study the baud rate of like the input through our eye, our optic nerve, and so forth. But it's actually quite limited. And we focus on those things which are most immediate and most practical, right? Like, we want to determine if that piece of food is rotten, is it still good to eat? Is it dangerous for us to eat? You know, when you come to a fruit tree and you see the cherry is a little bit past their due date, maybe we're going to have some fun eating those cherries. But anyway, the point is it's for recognizing, right, whether something's safe to eat, whether somebody is an acceptable sexual partner, and so forth, whether something will serve us for shelter or food or place to rest. Is a place safe for us to sleep so we won't get bothered or attacked by wild animals or other people while we're sleeping. This is what our mind is kind of taking as priority. And because of that, it makes assumptions very quickly. And then it starts to believe those assumptions to be true. And that's the basis for what we call ignorance, which is one of the root causes of our suffering. So meditation is to help us to transform that ignorance, to open ourselves up and see, am I sure about my perceptions? And usually we find that we have much more to learn and that it's okay. We can still operate in the world not knowing perfectly, not having perfect perceptions, but we try every moment to have a better perception. It's important because for us to understand our emotions and the root of our suffering, we have to call it by its true name. It means we have to not get caught in delusive perceptions about the root of our suffering. Okay, and to finish, the fifth, everywhere, all at once, mental formation is volition. So volition also means our deepest aspiration. So when we come to a retreat center like Deer Park and we come to the schedule and we practice meditation, it's because we have a deep volition, a deep aspiration to wake up, and we want that wake up to happen in a collective way, not just for ourselves as an individual, but we also want to support each other on the path. And so this volition is very important, but our volition can also drag us into very painful places. When we get attached to a particular person, a particular emotion, a particular mental formation, and we can spend our whole life trying to obtain that feeling or that person or that title, that honor. Some of us may not know it, but deep in our consciousness we are still trying to please our Father. We're still trying to get those words of approval when our father or our mother said, "Good job, you did so well." And we, in our job, in our romantic relationships, in our in society, we try to get the kind of title, the kind of position, the kind of accolades, prizes, recognition that somehow just replicate that joyful feeling we had when our father or our mother said, "Good job, excellent, you're so talented." We just need somebody to tell us that, that's all. But we need people who are more and more important. We need more and more people to tell us that. Otherwise, we cannot sleep at night. We feel like we are not good enough. We are not successful. And I can tell you, you'll never get enough attention. If that's your attitude, your suffering will only grow and increase. And as monks and nuns, a fundamental part of our training is to let go of our attachment, our attention-seeking nature, our need for appreciation. It doesn't mean that we don't appreciate each other, but we recognize when there's some kind of attachment. And I know I still have that attachment in me, but I know how to recognize it and let go of it because it doesn't bring me happiness. Because my father is not there telling me, "Oh, good job." And I know that that feeling of joy is not coming from my father, it's coming from within me. And when I breathe mindfully and I take care of my 5 skandhas and I learn how to take care of a moment of consciousness so as to not give rise to this grasping as subject and object, then I feel at peace and I don't need anything else. And that's a wonderful experience. That's the meaning of learning to dwell happily in the present moment. So I thank you for listening. I know it's been a little bit long, but I tried to review what we learned yesterday and also introduce some new aspects. I hope that one area that we can continue to look into is this area of metabolism. So we can have a kind of awakened metabolism. It means awareness of how we are generating energy with our mindful breathing, with our the food that we eat, because this topic of consumption is hugely important in the 21st century. And so I look forward to collaborating with you as a fellow scientist on the path and learning more about these mental formations as well as about the nature of our body and our mind. So thank you for your practice and your deep listening. We finish with 3 sounds of the bell.